G'day, sports fans, and we are back for another exciting edition of the Sports Desk with Mike, Mark, and Kyle. I'm Mike Bueller.
And I'm Mark Sanders.
And we are still hoping that our good friend Kyle Roberts is going to join us by telephone later. But we are going to lead off right now by talking about the National Football League. And the first game we are going to talk about is my Tennessee Titans are hosting Mark Sanders' Minnesota Vikings. And what's even cooler is Mark is going to be at that game. So, Mark, take her away.
Yes, I will be covering the game on behalf of the DAR newspaper here in Poplar Bluff. Our angle on the game is that wide receiver Jordan Addison has family here in the Poplar Bluff area. So I feel very privileged and honored to be able to cover that game from the press box. We've got Minnesota currently sitting at 7-2 in second place in the NFC North against the Tennessee Titans, who are currently tied with Jacksonville in the basement of the AFC South.
That's right. The Tennessee Titans right now are thick in the hunt, not for a playoff spot or the AFC South title, but for the number one pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. If we lose the rest of our games, there's a good chance we're going to get that number one pick.
Well, I wouldn't count my chickens before they hatch, because Minnesota's starting quarterback Sam Darnold has played less than stellar football the past 2 weeks. He has more interceptions than touchdowns. In fact, he threw 3 official interceptions. He would have thrown 4, except one of them was called back thanks to a Jacksonville defensive holding penalty. But I'm not very confident in how Minnesota is going to play on the road against Tennessee. Are they going to rely on the run and try to take the ball out of Darnold's hands? Will Kevin O'Connell continue to be aggressive and see if his trust in Darnold is fulfilled? Obviously, they have a lot of big weapons on offense: Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. They have the receivers to move the ball downfield quickly, but you really have to think about what kind of trust level the team has in Sam Darnold right now. Speaking of trust level, how do you think the Titans are going to approach the game with Will Levis back under center?
My guess is we are going to let Will Levis do his thing the rest of the year to see if he deserves a chance to lead this team. We are going to give him the rest of the season. He has not done very good right now. In fact, when Mark was talking about Sam Darnold's woes, I was thinking about how Tennessee Titans fans are hearing that and looking at Will Levis and saying, hold our Mountain Dew.
I think that if Darnold can just avoid turning the ball over, if the Vikings can have the sort of time of possession and certainly their play from their defense, which has just been for the most part outstanding this season, it looks like it should be an easy win for the Vikings. But again, anyone who's a Vikings fan knows that nothing comes easy in Minnesota.
Of course not, and we Titans fans are starting to learn about that, because after having a nice run the last few years with Derrick Henry taking snaps or taking handoffs and Ryan Tannehill under center, they are both gone now, and we have reverted back to being one of the worst teams in football.
So, however this turns out, we'll talk about it next week, and I am looking forward to the drive to Nashville on Sunday.
You'll enjoy it.
All right, our marquee game this week. Everybody has had this game circled on their calendar since the beginning of the season. Now it takes on even greater meaning. The undefeated Kansas City Chiefs, sitting at 9-0, go on the road and play at Buffalo, sitting at 8-2. There's not much at stake with this game, just the number one seed and home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs. Now, the conventional wisdom on this game is that Kansas City has been squeaking by, and you'll hear all of the haters say, well, the refs always call every game for Kansas City, and they get lucky, and this and that and the other thing. And it certainly did look like they were going to go down to defeat last week with a last-second field goal attempt from the Denver Broncos, but that kick was blocked, and Kansas City kept their perfect record. Now, I've got a couple of different ways of thinking about this. Kansas City has not been winning games decisively. They have been getting out of some of these games by the skin of their teeth, while Buffalo has looked fairly dominating in many of their wins. Buffalo has gone out of the playoffs the past several years at the hands of the Chiefs. This game is in Buffalo. They're going to be really prepared for this. Everything is going against the Chiefs this week. All indications clearly point to Buffalo winning this game by at least a touchdown, which is why I'm picking Kansas City to win this game.
It's going to be interesting because I've looked at this game and said this could be the game where the Chiefs lose. But like you said, with everybody thinking the Chiefs are going to lose, this will probably be the game that the Chiefs will find a way to win.
There is nothing that motivates Mahomes and Kelsey and Andy Reid and all of the rest of that team more than being disrespected by the national media and odds makers. And the fact that they are underdogs on the road, the fact that probably most national sports pundits will pick Buffalo to win this game, I think they're really going to use that as motivation. I think you're going to see the Kansas City team that we usually see in the playoffs come out and play at Buffalo. Again, I could be wrong about this. They could struggle as they have, but they still have the league's best defense. They still have Mahomes and Kelsey. They may get Isaac Pacheco back in the backfield. He's supposed to be brought off of injured reserve. We don't know what his health level will be, but if they could have Pacheco running healthy again, that would be a big boost to the Kansas City offense.
Speaking of big games in the AFC this week, we also have
Baltimore 7-3, sitting just half a game behind the first place. You heard it right, first place Pittsburgh Steelers, sitting at 7-2. This is one of two annual grudge matches between two teams in the AFC North that don't just dislike each other. It's not a friendly rivalry. These two teams hate each other. It's sort of like back in Rocky III when they did the little fake interview with Clubber Lang. Said, "Do you have a prediction for the fight?" And he says, "My prediction, pain." Exactly. This is going to be a slugfest. Absolutely.
It's going to be a wild one. Speaking of big games, we have the Thursday night game. We have the Washington Commanders taking on the Philadelphia Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field in Philly.
This is going to be a really exciting game. I didn't know a whole lot about Jaden Daniels. I don't follow college football really that closely across the entire season. I knew Daniels was a big prospect, but he has just been electric this year, and I don't trust Philadelphia at 7-2. I really don't think they're as good as their record. I think they played a weak schedule. I think Washington probably has the edge in this game. It is Thursday night, so who knows? We don't know if Daniel's ribs are fully healed from that injury the week before, but I do think it's going to be a high-scoring and competitive game.
Also coming up in a game that you're going to be interested in because it's the Vikings' two NFC North rivals. The Green Bay Packers are heading to Soldier Field to take on the foundering Chicago Bears.
About a month ago, this looked like it was going to be a great game. It looked like Chicago was on the upswing. Caleb Williams, their number one pick rookie quarterback, was showing real promise. Green Bay is always in the mix. Green Bay is Green Bay. They're well coached. They're well managed. In terms of the front office, so they're always going to be there. Green Bay is currently sitting at 6-3. They're still struggling with injury issues with their starting quarterback Jordan Love. Love has thrown a lot of interceptions. He still throws a lot of touchdowns, but he's still making bad decisions at times where he shouldn't be. Chicago, however, is in absolute free fall. They've fired their offensive coordinator. Every week is just death watch for head coach Matt Eberflus. So who knows? This game is going to be at Chicago. I think Green Bay will probably win decisively in this game, and we'll just have to see what happens to the Bears. It is. It's been a bad 30 years to be a Bears fan.
And in what has turned out to be a surprisingly solid matchup, the Atlanta Falcons are heading to the Mile High City to take on the Denver Broncos.
Now, of course, Atlanta is led by quarterback Kirk Cousins, and as a Vikings fan, we know all about Kirk Cousins. He's been a very polarizing figure among Vikings fans, those who love him and those who think that he underachieved. And what we see from Cousins is that he has great stats and he makes a lot of big plays, but the question is, can he lead a team to victory? And it's a 50-50 proposition. Sometimes he can, and sometimes he can't. I think Atlanta is going to struggle with the altitude outside at Denver. I think Denver is going to be playing angry the entire game because of the way that they lost to Kansas City. They're sitting at 5-5, so they still have a chance to slip into a wild card spot, that last wild card spot in the AFC, but they really need to start putting together some wins. Atlanta, on the other hand, even though they're sitting at 6-4, the next team below them in the NFC South, which is the worst division in football, is Tampa, and Atlanta has already beaten Tampa twice. So they're pretty much a lock for the NFC South title. So I think Denver probably is going to have the edge in this game.
And in a game that looked like a great matchup before the season, but now looks like a lousy one, the Houston Texans are making the trip to North Texas to take on the horrible Dallas Cowboys.
And Houston really gave away an opportunity to have themselves a signature win over the Detroit Lions. There's no shame in losing to the best team in football, and that's who the Lions are right now. But they really gave that game away. They should be sitting at 7-3 rather than 6-4, but they are almost certain to advance to 7-4 over a win over the 3-6 Dallas Cowboys. They've lost their starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, to season-ending surgery. The defense is in disarray. The offense is practically non-existent. I think this is going to be a big Monday night win for the Houston Texans.
And the fun is going to really start in the offseason when Jerry Jones, or as I like to call him, Dungeon Master, because he reminds me of the 1980s cartoon character on the show Dungeons and Dragons, fires Mike McCarthy and blows that team up with a Tsar Bomba.
If I was Mike McCarthy, I would just be playing video games during the week. I wouldn't even be planning for a game. It doesn't make any difference. He is so gone. He is so gone.
That just about hits the nail on the head. Now we're going to switch gears to Mizzou football, and the Missouri Tigers got a really nice win last Saturday over the Oklahoma Sooners, and better yet, they got it on the weekend that was the anniversary of the infamous Norman Conquest. Mark.
Yes, whenever we talk about Mizzou against Oklahoma, anyone who was a Mizzou fan back in the 70s or 80s, we have PTSD about playing Oklahoma, and that's what I think was most significant about the fourth quarter win that we had. Is that is a game that Mizzou should have lost, and in past years definitely would have lost. They took a one-touchdown lead late, they gave up that lead, and then they coughed up the ball and were all of a sudden down by 7. But instead of giving up, they came back with less than 2 minutes remaining. They tied the game up, and then they had a strip sack with a scoop and score for an improbable 30-23 win, and almost all of the action in this game happened in the last 4 or 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. Granted, Oklahoma is not having a great year this season, but it doesn't matter how other teams are performing. What matters in college football is stacking up wins, and Mizzou moved to 7-2. Of course, it is a completely disrespected 7-2 win because many of those wins came over inferior opponents. The two quality teams that they played, Texas A&M and Alabama, blew them out of the stadium. So this weekend is going to be a big test. They're going to be on the road at South Carolina, a 6-4 team that's been playing really well the past few weeks, especially their offense. So it's going to be a test for the Tigers' defense on the road, and we also have to wait and see whether Brady Cook is healthy enough to start or whether we will go with backup Drew Pine, who, while he does not have the same sort of physical skills and talent that Brady Cook has, he availed himself very well in leading the Tigers to victory. So I figure we probably have at least as much of a chance on offense with a healthy Drew Pine as opposed to a not fully healthy Brady Cook. So I think head coach Eli Drinkwitz is really going to just rely on his medical staff. And if Brady's not 100%, then you really don't need to use him. I know that what they're still saying in Columbia is we still have a chance to make the top 12 in the College Bowl series. But in reality, even if they win that game at South Carolina, their next two opponents are Mississippi State, currently sitting at 2-8, and then a home game against Arkansas, while Arkansas is currently 5-4 and has been frisky in some games this season. They still those are not two big enough wins to put you over the top of about a half a dozen other two-loss SEC teams that are sitting ahead of you in the rankings.
Yeah, the Mizzou Tigers do have a chance to make the SEC championship game, just not a very good one, and maybe not even a realistic one.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit and when looking at Missouri football is, let's assume that they lose this weekend at South Carolina and then win their last two games against the Bulldogs and the Razorbacks. They would finish 9-3. They would get a second-tier bowl game at that point. Can we really consider a 9-3 season in Columbia a failure for the Mizzou football team?
No, but... That's the best way to put it. No, but we were hoping for more. But at the same time, these are the Mizzou Tigers, and anything with the any success with the Mizzou Tigers at times is almost a bonus, because like you, I remember those 80s and 90s teams that were dog awful. When I first started following Missouri Tigers football, they were coached by Woody Woodenhofer, and we were so bad that I referred to him as Woody Woodpecker.
Oh yeah, those I started at Mizzou in the fall of 1986. Woodenhofer was already gone. We had Bob Stoops, who was certainly no better. And my freshman year, that season, we didn't win a single game until we blew out the Kansas Jayhawks on the last weekend of the season. That was a 48-0 win. And yes, we did storm the field and rip out the goalposts. And I have photographic evidence to prove this. No, I don't think a 9-3 season is a failure at all. But like you said, last season, the record, the win over Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, we had playoff aspirations. So I think in terms of not making the playoffs, I think that's going to be a bit of a disappointment. But the question that I think needs to be asked for the future, especially since Brady Cook is going to graduate, is can Missouri recruit a 5-star quarterback? I mean, can we get that top 10 first-round draft pick guy who can take the Tigers to the next level?
And according to Kyle Roberts, the answer is yes, because he messaged me this morning, and he says that the Missouri Tigers have got a commitment from Matt Zollers, who is a 5-star quarterback, I believe, out of the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, Missouri has a really good track record for aspiring quarterbacks to the NFL. Now, nobody has really succeeded as a starter just yet, but you had Chase Daniel, who played for Gary Pinkel, and Chase was he had a very successful career as a backup quarterback. He's now working online as an analyst and doing a really good job. You've got Blaine Gabbert, who failed at Jacksonville, but I'm not sure a quarterback can succeed at Jacksonville. You've got Drew Lock, who is backing up the woeful Daniel Jones at New York. I mean, we have a record of quarterbacks getting drafted into the NFL. And I'm wondering, can Pinkel get the really great one? Can he get the surefire first-round draft pick, a top 10 pick, a consensus guy where everybody says this guy is a great quarterback? Someone like a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams or a J.J. McCarthy, who has the potential to lead the team deep into a playoff run.
That would be great. Hopefully we can. We would both love to see the Missouri Tigers finally get over the hump and make the college football playoff and make a run at a national championship.
And just the fact that we can say that sort of thing without laughing out loud shows you the
Exactly.
progress that the program has made. We're going to shift gears now and turn our attention to the Three Rivers Raiders and the men's and women's basketball teams and how they have fared here early on in the season. Mike?
Well, it's been an interesting ride. I'm going to start off, first of all, with the Lady Raiders, who got a huge win Tuesday night on the road in Robinson, Illinois against the Lincoln Trail College Lady Statesmen. For the first time this season, the Lady Raiders broke the 100-point barrier and came home with a 105-56 win. They are 4-1 right now, and they also won the Lady Raider Classic over the weekend by getting big wins over Northeastern Oklahoma A&M and John A. Logan. Other than an overtime loss against number 3 Wabash Valley, the Lady Raiders have not lost a game all year, and the preseason expectations of them being a national championship contender seem to be falling right into place.
One of the things that I'd like to see the Lady Raiders do, especially since they will face a lot of tough competition this season, is to see how they do in winning close games, coming from behind in the fourth quarter, being able to stop runs late in the game, where you're only leading by 3 or 4 points and another team is making a run. I'd like to see, when it's fun when you're blowing out other teams and winning by 30 or 40 points, but that doesn't always give you the experience that you need to win at the tournament level. So I do hope, obviously, we like it when they win and when they win big, but I want to see them get tested against tougher competition and see how that turns out for them, because that's what they need to succeed in the playoffs.
Agreed, and they are going to be playing some tougher teams. They have a national tournament rematch coming up a week from tomorrow against Shelton State at the Leibel Family Sports Complex on the campus of Three Rivers College. That's going to be a dandy game. The weekend after that, the Friday and Saturday after Thanksgiving, they are going to be playing in Texas in a tournament. I don't have the opponents right in front of me, but I believe one of them is Trinity Valley, Texas, which I think is another team that played at the national tournament last season. So they will be getting some good tests. It's going to be fun to watch.
Terrific. How is head coach Robert Kirby and the men's team doing lately?
The Raiders are 4-2. We have had a couple of very, very close losses in our last 2 games. The men were at Lincoln Trail Tuesday night as well, lost in overtime in a back-and-forth defensive battle. The Raiders were down, I believe, 6 points in the second half, used a 10-2 run to take a late lead, had a 2-point lead in the final seconds before Lincoln Trail tied it and sent it to overtime, then pulled it out in overtime. The game before that, last Saturday, they played an undefeated Southeastern Iowa team and lost that game when Southeastern Iowa hit a shot just ahead of the buzzer. So the Raiders are 4-2, but they are a couple of made shots away from being undefeated right now. Defensively, they are great. They are playing smothering defense. They gave up 69 points Tuesday night at Lincoln Trail because they had overtime. That's the most points this team's given up all year. That is a very impressive statistic. The offense needs some work, but Coach Kirby has said it's always good to have your defense ahead of your offense and let your offense catch up.
Right, and the season is still early, and I think a couple of close losses, again, like I said in reference to the Lady Raiders, I think that can give you a lot of good experience, even though you don't come out on the winning side. I just think going through those tests can help a team to learn how to win in the last seconds when it comes down to crunch time. So I suspect that that's going to be good experience for our men's team, and I feel confident that the offense will come together. Usually that offensive chemistry takes a little bit longer into the season to build. So I think the fact that our defense is playing well and that we're currently sitting at 4-2, I think that bodes well for the future at Three Rivers.
Good deal. We are going to talk a little bit about high school football. Then we're going to have a little bit about high school volleyball. And then Mark's got a couple of pretty cool thoughts on buys and are they good or bad for teams. But first of all, we're going to talk about high school football. The Poplar Bluff Mules ended their season last Friday night at Cape Central, only losing by 1 touchdown to a team that beat them 49-6 earlier in the season.
The story of the Poplar Bluff Mules varsity football team this year is really the story of 2 teams. You have a team that started off 1-5, and then you had a team that really ran off a string of impressive wins at the end of the season. They spent the early part of the season struggling to find an offensive identity, while on defense, they were really looking for fundamentals, keeping assignments, making tackles, knowing what to expect from the other team. And when all of those different components came together, it was like a completely different team. I watched the Mules play at home against Farmington, and even though they only lost that game by 3 points, they were dominated on the field at times by the Knights, especially on defense. The reason they lost that game at home is both because they could not stop Farmington from scoring when Farmington needed to score. It was completely different in the first round of the playoffs. Poplar Bluff went and dominated on both sides of the ball. And even though I'm not brokenhearted about the loss to Cape Central, I did predict that it was going to be a close battle. I did not think that Cape Central would be able to score at will on the Mules defense, which they did not. That's the way that football games go. I think that everyone would agree that this year Cape Central was a better balanced overall team, so I don't think anyone was surprised by that. But Bluff was in it to the very end. That game very easily could have gone the other way. So I'm going to have a conversation with Mules coach Jeff Mannon this week, and we're going to talk about how his team finished up and also what he's looking forward to. And our listeners can look forward to seeing that in the pages of the DAR or online at cmoball.com after that is completed.
Good deal. We do still have some area teams that are playing a game that Mark's going to be at Friday night. The Dexter Bearcats are hosting the St. Genevieve Dragons for the Class 3 District 1 title. Mark, take her away.
All right, Dexter sitting undefeated. They are currently scoring 46 points on average on offense while only giving up an unbelievable 8.3 points, so less than 10 points given up this year on average by their defense. On the other hand, you have a St. Gen team that is scoring an average of 26 points per game while giving up almost the same number. St. Gen is 7-4. The one thing to consider, however, in this championship game is that St. Genevieve has knocked Dexter out of the district playoffs in 3 out of the last 4 years, 2023, 22, and in 2020. The keys for Dexter are the keys that they have been following all season long. Keep that running game grinding, ball possession, and then one of the things that they need to work on in light of the way that Fredericktown was able to pass down the field on them is their pass defense, getting pressure on the St. Gen quarterback and also making sure that those receivers don't get past them for those over-the-top plays. And I feel confident that if they can do both of those things, I think that they're probably going to be celebrating a championship over in Dexter. But nothing's for sure. They still have to go out and win the game in between the lines.
We got some other area teams playing this week. Tell me about those.
Well, we've got in Class 1, we still have Charleston active. They'll be playing the semifinal of the Class 1 District 1 at Crystal City. In Class 2, Caruthersville will be playing for the district championship at Valley Catholic. We've already talked about Class 3. That's going to be Dexter hosting St. Genevieve. In Class 4 action, Perryville will be traveling to Festus. And a couple of teams that we are well familiar with here in Poplar Bluff. In Class 5, Cape Central, currently sitting at 10-1, will take on the top seed up in St. Louis, Cardinal Ritter. Now, Cape Central has a 10-1 record against Cardinal Ritter's 8-1 record. Cardinal Ritter did have that first round bye, which is why they've played fewer games so far than Cape. Cape is averaging 41.7 points per game, while their defense is only giving up 12.2. And the numbers look very similar for Cardinal Ritter, scoring 40.2 points per game while only giving up 13.6. So this really is a clash of the Titans on both sides of the ball, and I think that will be a really interesting tilt. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that in between snaps at Dexter. And in Class 6, our familiar foe, the Jackson Indians, sitting at 8-2, will travel north to Imperial to take on Seckman High School. Seckman is undefeated, but that should not scare the Jackson team off too much, as they are currently holding a 6-1 lifetime record against Seckman. So that should be a great battle in the Class 6 District 1 championship.
And one thing that's also interesting is that, in that game, even though Seckman has the better record, the general consensus is the Seckman Jaguars have not played the schedule that Jackson has. Jackson's 2 losses have came to East St. Louis and Edwardsville, 2 very powerful Illinois teams. East St. Louis in particular is considered to be one of the best teams in the entire country. Actually, take that back. No, they didn't play East St. Louis. Edwardsville played East St. Louis. Their other loss is to Cardinal Ritter, and Cardinal Ritter is considered to be one of the best teams in the country. So a lot of people, including a lot of the St. Louis media, are picking Jackson to win that game.
Well, I mean, we know how good Jackson is. Everyone in Poplar Bluff knows that Jackson, they are a perennial powerhouse. They churn out good teams every year. So yeah, I mean, I think if I was a Jackson fan, I would feel pretty confident. I would not let Seckman's undefeated record intimidate me in any way.
It's going to be interesting. Got a quick thought on the end of the volleyball season. We wrapped that up last weekend. 2 Southeast Missouri teams are playing in that tournament in Cape Girardeau, which is the last year Cape is hosting it. It is heading all the way up to St. Joseph next fall, which is up north of Kansas City. So it's going to be a very long drive for any SEMO teams that make it up there. But the Advance Hornets took second in Class 1, while the St. Vincent Indians of Perryville took third in Class 2. Advance played a very powerful Winona squad in the championship match. Winona is the only Class 1 team that beat Advance this year. Advance's other losses were 2 larger schools. But Winona was one of the most dominant teams in the state. I think they were a number 1 team in the Max Preps poll pretty well the entire season. And it ended up being a pretty solid championship match, even though Winona won that match in straight sets.
Now, Mike, you and I went to Dexter to watch Dexter host the Notre Dame Bulldogs in their district championship. Notre Dame won a very close 5-set match. How did they end up doing in the state playoffs?
Notre Dame lost in the next round in sectionals to Potosi, which went on to win the Class 3 state championship.
Interesting. I don't follow a lot of high school volleyball, but it is really exciting to watch in person.
One thing that me and Mark want to talk about is, are buys good or bad for teams in sports? Because we've seen a lot of teams over the years that have played good enough to get a first-round bye, but that extra week of rest has often came back and haunted them. I know back in 2008, the Tennessee Titans got the number 1 seed in the AFC and home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and they got a first-round bye, but that extra week of rest ended up coming back to bite them, because in the divisional round, they got beat at home by the Baltimore Ravens. And Mark, you saw a team coming off a bye last week that did not lose, but it seemed they took a little while to get going, and I'll let you go from there.
Yes, definitely. Dexter got off to a slow start. There's no denying that. They had a turnover on their first possession. They fumbled the ball away after gaining about 60 or so yards driving into Fredericktown territory, and then they turned over the ball. And then their coach told me after the game he thought that they were just a step slow early on. They certainly got it together after halftime and just dominated the second half of that game. So when you look at the final score, it doesn't really look like it was a close game. But the fact of the matter is Dexter wasn't in a lot of close games this year, and that first half was really close. And I think that Fredericktown went in at halftime feeling pretty confident about their chances. And we can think, I think this is especially true in Major League Baseball, where the team with the best record gets to sit out for the first round of the playoffs while the wild card teams play. And then by the time they get around to playing, those wild card teams, whoever advances has a lot of momentum. They've been playing. They've got they've got their rotations set, and it's no guarantee anymore that the team with the best record will advance to the championship. Now, that doesn't always happen, but I am not convinced that taking a week off and waiting to play a playoff game is necessarily a good thing for a team. Now, it's obviously necessary with these unbalanced tournament brackets that we have, especially in high school districts. But I think it's something coaches are probably well aware of this, that they need to keep their team sharp and hungry when they have that week off before they enter into playoff competition.
And we are going to get to see that in the college football playoff coming up soon, because the top four teams in that are going to get first round byes, and we are both going to be very curious to see if anybody gets upset as a result.
Well, if they get too upset, then we can just go ahead and expand the college football playoff to 16 teams, which is where it should have been from the very beginning.
Exactly.
I don't understand this resistance to expanding college playoffs. There's been plenty of evidence from all of the pro sports that playoffs are where you attract attention, where you attract viewership, where you attract money. And I don't understand why college football is resisting having a 16-team tournament. You start with 8 bowl games that actually matter. I'm tired of hearing people talk about, well, this devalues the tradition of the bowl games. If a bowl game does not lead the winning team in the direction of a championship, it's an exhibition game, and it doesn't matter. Mizzou will they'll definitely be in a bowl game this year, but it will almost certainly be an exhibition game with no consequences other than maybe a nice trophy and a nice payday for the athletic department. We want to see games that matter. We want to see the team that wins advance to the next level, advance toward a championship, and I think if we open that up to more teams, that is going to open it up to more fans, more communities across the country having a vested stake, not only in the postseason, but in the regular season, because every game matters all year if there are 16 slots available for the playoffs.
Indeed. And that's our show for this week. Come back next week to the Sports Desk with Mike, Mark, and hopefully Kyle. And we're going to have an exciting show next week. We're going to talk a little more National Football League. We're going to talk some more high school football. And we are hoping to have a special guest or two on the show. Stay tuned for that, folks. So, wrapping up for this week, I'm Mike Bueller.
And I'm Mark Sanders.
And this has been the Sports Desk with Mike, Mark, and Kyle.